Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming along to what we know will be a very, very stimulating and interesting event. This week, of course, is our International Week, and we're using the week to focus on all different aspects of internationalism and global citizenship and all of the different things that we believe are really, really important for our school and our community. And I spoke to the students and the staff Monday morning, along with David Henry, our head of school, about the importance of us understanding our common humanity, where we've come from, where we're going, and what we can do together to make the world a better place. And so, as part of our International Week, the Esprit de Corps team have got together and they've put this event in place where we welcome Mr. Gulwali Passarlay to our school to talk about his experiences over time and what he's gone through since he left Afghanistan many years ago. I don't think there's any more important time to be talking about refugees at the moment in the world, with events that continue to happen in Afghanistan, in Ukraine, of course, as well, and in other places around the world that are perhaps less mediatized, but also very, very important. So I'd like to ask Victoria to come up and say a few words about what she has done to put together this event and to formally welcome Mr. Passarlay to our school and open our arms, our hearts and our minds to what you have to say. So thank you very much for coming. You're very, very welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for a small introduction for me as well. I would like to thank you all for coming here. It means a lot to see many faces, to see many people who have signed up. This initiative is very important to me and to all the other members of our project, and also probably to all of you as well, and that's why you are here. A few weeks ago actually, we had a fundraiser which you participated in, and we managed to fund this event from that fundraiser, and for that I would like to thank you once again. And I would also like to introduce our guest, Mr. Passarlay, and thank you for coming. It means a lot to have you here and to continue spreading awareness about such an important issue, especially through your, I'd say, expertise. And welcome once again, and thank you very much everyone for coming.
Do I have to use the mic? I think people can hear me. Or do you want me to use the other mic? I can speak maybe. Thank you. Good afternoon, and thanks, Victoria. Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here. So I'm the author of this book, The Lightless Sky. If you haven't read it, I encourage you to read it. I'll just leave it here. So I'll tell you briefly of my story of leaving Afghanistan as a child and coming to the UK as a refugee. I didn't have a nice or positive time in France, unfortunately, about 15 years ago or so. But before I do that, I actually returned back from Kabul last week. I went back to Afghanistan after 16 years to see my mother. I haven't seen her in these years. I think she sacrificed hugely to send me and my older brother Hazrat to the UK, to Europe actually, for our safety and security. But actually, in the process, she lost us. I mean, she saved us, but she lost us for not seeing us for so long. And so recently, end of February, I had the chance to travel back to Kabul. Although it was very dangerous, it was a very risky thing to do. But to be honest, because I was a refugee for the last 14 years, I wasn't legally able to travel back. But also there was the issue, Afghanistan was never really safe. So we used to, in the last 20 or so years, on average, we used to lose about 300, 350 people a day. In attacks across the country, there would be suicide bombing, there would be other types of attacks and rocket attacks and bombardments by NATO forces and US forces and others. So there was never really a good time to travel. And so when I went back and I had the chance to travel back, I thought, life is a risk and sometimes you have to take risks. My mother wasn't well, and I thought, I had some free time on my hand and recently became a British citizen, so I knew if things become, problematic, I could get out. I mean, I could go to most of the neighboring countries without a visa. I can go to like Dubai or Qatar or whatever. I can get out because like that passport gives you that security. And until now, I used to do whenever I spoke at schools or in universities and other conferences, I always said, for example, those of you who are French or European citizens, your passport enables you to go to like most of the world. Like my British passport now enables me to go to 175 countries without visa or visa on arrival, or a very simple process. But my Afghan passport, which I couldn't use until recently, and I don't have one now because of what has happened, the changes in the government, and the changes in the country, enables Afghans to go to 25 countries or so without visa or visa on arrival or e-visa. And most of these countries are basically small islands in the middle of nowhere in the Caribbean and faraway places, and most of these places I haven't even heard the name of. Just enter the building, and Victoria was showing me around, and I told her all the flags, countries, and hopefully you were impressed. But my geography is pretty good, but these places that Afghans could travel to, I haven't even heard their name of. So there is inherent injustice in the global governing system, in the way things are done. And we've just been speaking earlier about Ukraine, which I'll come to. I mean, it's great to see the sense of solidarity and compassion and kindness and welcome. I was in Vienna over the weekend visiting my uncle. I saw there was like centers of welcome for Ukrainians. At the airport, outside, there were a lot of resources. There were people who were fundraising. I saw a lot of clothes being donated at the church, in the mosque, and people who are taking things to Poland and other places. And there were a lot of help available at the train stations. And same when I arrived in Paris. Actually, a week earlier, after coming back from Kabul, I was in Copenhagen. I saw the same thing. But I have never seen that solidarity in the last 15 years of me advocating and campaigning for refugees' rights for Afghans, for Syrians, or for Iraqis, or Eritreans, Somalians, or the list goes on. It's very problematic to see the selective solidarity and compassion when it comes to the Ukrainian situation. I mean, it's great they're receiving help and support, and I think there needs to be more help and support available to them. Yes, they're close to us, and we can see it. It's in Europe. But at the same time, if I'm a refugee and somebody else is a refugee, no matter our nationalities and backgrounds, if I'm running away from bombs and you're running away from bombs, there should not be difference in the way we are treated. And unfortunately, particularly in Britain, there's this attitudes of good and bad refugees, and the deserving and undeserving. And so yes, that's another topic. But I'll go back to Afghanistan. So yes, I went back, and it was a really strange experience. I felt kind of a traveler in my own home, in my own country. I didn't feel completely belong. It was a really strange thing, because in the UK, for many years, I didn't feel belong. I felt, an outsider. And then when I was able to get my status, it took 6 years, and then it, took 12, 14 years to get my citizenship. In Afghanistan, although that was my home country where I was born, and I have my roots there, my mother, my siblings, and my family, I was really pleased to see them. And sadly, my grandparents, I wasn't able to see. They passed away, and my uncle recently passed away, and there was like my little sister passed away a few years ago. So there was things that was meant to be there but wasn't there. So that just shows you the sacrifices that people make when they become refugees, when they become asylum seekers, when they seek protection and safety. And so the thing that really hurt me, I saw it on social media, I saw it on the Afghan media about the poverty since the Taliban took over the country 7 months ago, last August. There was poverty in Afghanistan before. There was, deprivation. People were struggling. But the desperation I saw now, even I saw it as I said, on social media, but being there and seeing kids and women begging on the street. Before, people used to ask for money. And now I was there for 2 weeks. No one ever asked me for money. Everyone, the kids I saw, uncle, buy me a piece of bread. People were extremely poor. And so the reason that has happened is because since Taliban took over the country, all our asset has been frozen. There's no physical currency, or there's a limited currency. The banks have been struggling. The Afghans who had money actually left the country. And there are other Afghans who have saving in the banks and can't withdraw it because there is no money, and they have like a 200 or so limit to take out. Most Afghans are daily laborers, and so they have not been able to work because there's no work. Everybody's been struggling. I met somebody who was very educated. He said he was a defense lawyer, and he's like an attorney, and he has 5 brothers. They're all educated, and they have no jobs. So he said it's not just the poor people, the people who were laborers, who were farmers, who were like having like livestock and animals, who are now struggling because nobody's like buying their animals. Farmers haven't been able to grow crops because in northern Afghanistan and like most of the poorest province had the worst droughts in 30 years. I could go on and on, but there are like 6 million internally displaced Afghans. Half of them are displaced because of war and conflict. The rest are displaced because of natural disasters, because of drought, because of flooding, landslides. And there was a climate conference in Glasgow a few months ago. There was no mention of Afghanistan. I mean, Afghanistan is one of the worst affected areas by climate change, and nobody's even speaking about it. Anyhow, so I spent 2 weeks, and I was really hurt and disheartened, and I was glad. I raised some money, and I was able to help a few families with like the basic necessity of life, the things that we really take for granted. Food. I just brought them some flour, some rice, oil, beans, and sugar and tea. And I just realized the crisis is huge. The UN says about 97% of the country lives below poverty, which is like less than $2, like maybe just over €1 a day. But I would say like literally 100% of the country lives in poverty because there is no opportunities, there's no jobs. Most of these Afghan civil servants has not been paid for like 6 months. A lot of doctors are working for free. And they're saying until when? We have about 2,500 or so hospitals in Afghanistan. It was funded by the World Bank. They stopped its funding. So this hospital doesn't have equipments. Doctors are not being paid their salaries. And I saw an article where there was a report, I think a Sky News report, which said 10 women, for example, they need cesarean to give birth. The hospitals are only able to do 3 out of 10. And the rest, either the mother dies or the child dies. And the UN says 10 million people are experiencing famine. Half of them are children. And if action is not taken, 1 million children could die. There's lack of nutrition. So I'm sorry I'm depressing you, but the situation was really dire. And the thing that really upsets me is since the evacuation ended by the foreign countries like the UK and US and European countries, Afghanistan has not really been in the news. And so for example, teachers are not being paid. There's issues around girls' education, human rights. There's a lot of other problems, but right now the main issue is the basic thing, which is providing food and nutrition to these children. And the UN says we need £5 billion to actually do that. And Afghanistan had one of the harshest winter. Before I went, it was -14 some days. And when I was there, it was -7, -5 in the morning. And most of these Afghan people doesn't have anything to burn. They can't afford to buy gas to burn. They can't afford wood because it's expensive. They just don't have the money. I saw so many kids basically collecting plastics and collecting things to burn at home to keep them warm. So yeah, the situation is just very dire. And I hope we can find some ways. This is actually, finally, after 7-8 months, there's a conference happening in London. I think it's co-organized by the UK and the UN and the EU to raise this money, the pledge that they have made. By the end of the year, the UN, UNICEF, and all these like charities helping Afghans, they need this money. I was at a charity called Afghan Aid office, and they were telling me they support about 100,000 people a week in 3 provinces. And their work used to be, they've been working there for the last 40 years. And their work, about 80 to 90% of their work was providing sustainable living to people. So helping women, empowering them to learn how to sew, learn how to make things, how to sell the things that they made, like jewelries and clothes and other things. They were helping people plant trees. They were helping people buy them like cows and livestock to have a means of survival, which was great. And so they were doing a lot of these integrational, sustainable type of work. And now, since the last 6 months, they said basically 90% of their work is giving people cash and giving people basic food. And so yes, it's just things somehow, somewhere things has to change. And I mean, the Taliban are bad. I know they're an extremist group, but they're now in charge. I think the US was comfortable in allowing them to take over and make deals with them. And then kind of, of course, I didn't agree with the US being there in the first place. I lost loved ones because of the war. About 150,000 Afghans were killed in the last 20 years. And then Afghans were abandoned and betrayed. And Afghanistan kind of left to it. And so now the US is basically holding $7 billion of Afghan reserve money from the central bank. And that is basically reducing the currency, devaluing the Afghan currency, the Afghani. And then we have issues of the prices are very high. I mean, there was a lot of, like in Kabul, and I went to other cities as well, there was a lot of food in shops, but people just didn't have the means to buy it. It's not that there's no food. And anyway, I'll end there, but I hope we can somehow write to our representatives and find ways, for the French government, for the European Union, for the UK, and for the rest of the world to not punish the Afghan people for something which is nothing to do with them. They didn't elect the Taliban. They didn't had a say in it. They were imposed on them. And so now the least we could do is to make sure this, humanitarian crisis is averted and people are helped, because people, like everybody was struggling. I'll end there. Anyway, going back to my story, I left Afghanistan because of the war and conflict, and I didn't really imagine one day going back to a situation where it was a lot worse than what I left. I left Afghanistan back in 2006. When I went back in 2022, it was much worse in terms of the conditions, the environment, the fear than it was back when I left. I made a journey across half of the world. I was in the hands of smugglers and traffickers. I was meant to be together with my brother, but we were separated by the smugglers. We traveled over to Pakistan, and from there we were separated. I didn't see him for the next maybe 14 months. I traveled alone, but I was very grateful, and I was very lucky to meet other Afghans, other refugees who helped me, took me on as a brother, as a friend. I went through Iran. We crossed borders undocumented. I mean, people say illegal. We were crossing borders illegally, but we weren't illegal. These terms that people use, like a bunch of migrants, illegals, and it dehumanizes refugees. People who are fleeing conflicts and wars and persecutions and injustices and oppressions are basically refugees, but these states in Europe wants to, they usually call them asylum seekers until they determine that you are a genuine refugee. So, crossing borders were very physically and mentally very challenging. I was age 12, so I was very, very young, and I was without my brother. I was kept looking for him. I've traveled across Turkey, which was a huge country, most of the time in trucks and in the back of trucks. So at night we used to walk. I mean, the lightless sky is 120,000 words, so I'm just giving you a brief summary to hopefully put things into perspective, that these guys who are making these journeys, the people that you see outside in Paris, and you see them on the bridges, you see them in the parks, they have made these desperate and really challenging journeys. And most of these guys have mental health issues, they have traumas, they left their loved ones behind, and so they have lots of issues in their lives, and it's great to see projects like yours trying to help them with like English classes or language classes, raise awareness, help them with like donations, and support them with whatever, because I saw people basically sleeping in parks, and the government actually has to do more to provide them with accommodation and adequate support. The reason the journey took me over a year, and it was about 12,000 miles instead of being about 5,000, which is the journey between Afghanistan and the UK. It was because I was kept being deported back and forth. So in Turkey, after arriving in Istanbul, spending some time in like basements like this, but a lot more closer spaces with other refugees. I was sent to Bulgaria. I was hoping this was a European country, my human rights would be respected. Perhaps they will ask me if I wanted to claim asylum. I had to jump from a moving train when we arrived there with other people. Most people were injured and they hurt themselves, and I wasn't really hurt so much. I mean, I growing up in Afghanistan, in Eastern Afghanistan. I was a shepherd with my grandparents. Although my father was a doctor and I had a very educated family, but I grew up with my grandparents living a nomadic life, which was really beautiful. But so these skills that I had learned as a child helped me, kind of balancing myself, jumping from the train. There was a lot of things I was doing for the first time, so it was kind of strange and curious, but also not so much. From Bulgaria, we were arrested. Before taken to hospital, we were in prison for a week and then deported back to Turkey, which now I know was illegal. They were not supposed to send us back. They were supposed to ask us and allowed us to claim asylum. But in the last 15 years I've been in the West, the Bulgarian authorities has continuously been cruel towards refugees. They've been torturing refugees. They've been sending them back over the border. There has been some sort of groups of like these mafia groups, or these they call it patriotic groups, where they find refugees, beat them and tortures them and send them back to Turkey. We were sent back by the Bulgarian army in the middle of December of 2006, and we had to walk back in snow. And sadly, things has not improved on that frontier. There's now a wall, there's now a fence between Turkey and Bulgaria. About 35 people that I can recall were killed in the last 15 years in Bulgaria by all sorts of means. and we were trying to send their bodies back to Afghanistan. So things has been in Turkey, and sometime later I was arrested. I spent time in prison in Istanbul. I didn't commit any crime. I wasn't convicted of any criminal activities. All I was doing was seeking protection and safety, which I now know is my human right. But the Turkish authority arrested us one day and put us in prison and then deported us all the way back to Iran. So crossing backwards was actually quite dangerous than coming from the other side. In Iran, they were sending us back to Afghanistan. The issue I had was if I go home, my mother told me when we left that I need to stay with my brother and be together and to not let go of each other and also to not come back. So I thought if I go back home without my brother, my mom would think he's dead. So I had to kind of find a way to run away from the Iranian police and make the journey back again, which I did, which was very stupid and risky, but I managed to escape and make the journey again. Second time I had an idea of how hard it was. Because the first time we just had to follow these smugglers who were mostly pretty heartless people. We just followed instructions. We were like sheep and they were like our shepherds. And some of them were nice, but most of them weren't. So these guys, they were facilitators, they were like the drivers, there was the guides, and there was like the big guys in the suit. So there was a mixture of, there were people who host us in their homes. Some of them were nice to us and treated us as guests, others weren't so kind. And so I made the journey second time, which was a lot more harder. I remember the Iranian border guard actually shot at us, and we managed to escape. Now, in 2022, 2021, last year, they have built a huge wall and electronic fence on the border between Iran and Turkey to prevent the Afghans. So there's been so many walls and fences, I haven't seen any bridges. So basically, in 2015, Hungary built wall and bridges, want to keep Europe white and Christian. And Poland was like, oh, this has nothing to do with us. We don't want any, these Syrians, these Muslim refugees. Same with Slovakia and Czech Republic and these Eastern European countries, and now are taking the Ukraine, which is really interesting. And just speaking to Victoria, she was like, they were actually in Poland. People weren't so kind to the Ukrainian before either. So, or the government wasn't so kind. So anyhow, the third time I was lucky. I made it to Greece, but that journey was, after making it back to Istanbul, back to Turkey, the smuggler was supposed to take us on a boat journey. We traveled for a whole day. The boat did not arrive. We stayed in a forest, in a jungle for 3 days and nights without food and water. But we persevered, and because we knew if you go back to the police, they will deport us and put us in prison. So there wasn't very much hope from the authorities. We were then, third evening, we had the smugglers come back with some food and some water. I still remember they brought us a box of tomatoes and some bread and some water, which was not very much. And then from there, took us in a small boat to a bigger boat. The big boat wasn't really big. They literally put 120 of us in a boat designed for 20 to 30 people. And so I don't know how I'm lucky to have survived and to be standing in front of you, because even in the last like 5-6 years, actually about 30,000 people lost their lives in the Mediterranean, in the Aegean Sea, trying to make journeys from Turkey to Greece, from North Africa, Tunisia and Libya and other places towards Italy. And so a lot of people, these are the guys we know, the numbers that we know, there could be more. So our boat was really heavy, and we were supposed to be in Greece in 4 hours. We ended up being in the sea for almost 48 hours. Never seen the sea before, I've never been in such a situation. That's another story. Thanks to the British, we used to have a way to the sea, and they took the sea away from us and just like made Afghanistan landlocked. That's another topic. But our water, food, everything ran out on board because there was not very much things in there. There's a few cheeses and tomatoes and stuff and some water. We were all seasick. Most of us, actually all of us, couldn't swim. And so if things wasn't getting worse, our boat broke down. Actually, within minutes, if the Greek Coast Guard had not found us, our boat would have capsized and we'd have drowned. And the thing in my head was, my mother would not know what has happened to me. My family would live in hope that I will come home one day, but I will never return. I mean, now it's strange because I just come back from home, which I wasn't for the last 15 years or so. Whenever I've been doing talks, I haven't been home. So it was a really, a really heartbreaking situation that we were faced with, and we were praying whatever prayers that we could think of, whatever supplication, evoking God's help and support, and thankfully we got rescued by the Greek Coast Guard. They came and found us and took our boat to safety. The local people have heard our boat being rescued, and they bring us food and water. I remember literally drinking a whole liter 1 liter bottle of water and eating whatever people give us. They were very, very tasty and delicious because we hadn't had proper food and water for over a week. It's just the humans, I mean, I think, we have the sense of resilience in the bodies, the strength where when we face with circumstances and situations, we just got to survive, like somehow we had to manage. And also have problems, like I have seen people tell me, oh, Gulwali, you've been very resilient, and the refugees are very resilient people. That's very problematic because we don't choose to be resilient. I mean, if you're at college here, at school here, and you want to work hard and you struggle, you stay resilient, that's something you have a choice. But if you're a refugee, you don't really have a choice but to be resilient. And that's not something that I choose. I rather I was vulnerable and I knew that people would help and support me, which was the case in most of the journey. Anyhow, we were taken to safety, and then we went to Athens, then we ended up being in some sort of legal limbo with the Greek governments. They gave us a piece of paper which was like, you had to leave the country within a month. We said fine, because we entered undocumented without the proper documentation and papers, which again doesn't make sense, because if you're a refugee, you can go by any means possible to seek asylum. That is allowed under international law, under humanitarian law, the UN Convention, but again, nobody told us about that, or perhaps the Greek government wasn't aware of it. And so I ended up being in prison in Greece for 2 weeks because the judge thought we were too young to be on the street on our own. I was like, great, I'm not going to grow up in 3 months, so what then? It was really bizarre because it was very illogical and irrational, because they give us a piece of paper which say you had to leave the country and then put us in prison. There was 11 of us. They put us in a children's prison, a lot better than the one in Bulgaria, in Turkey, in Iran. We were still a prison. I mean, they give us food, we were able to take shower, they give us clothes. The doctors and nurses helped us a lot, and they managed to get us out of the prison. And then we ran away from the refugee camp because we had to get out of the country. And so for the first time into my journey, about 9 months I was in this journey until then, I met a smuggler in a place called Patra in Greece who had met my brother, which was really good. Because everywhere I went, I was looking for my brother. And he told me my brother was heading to the UK. That's where I decided to actually go to the UK. Until then, I would have said anywhere where I was welcomed. Until then, I wasn't welcomed. And sadly, another point, since being a kind of a humanitarian and writing the book and traveling the world and advocating and campaigning for refugees' rights, the same Greece Coast Guard who saved me and my fellow refugees are actually now purposely drowning people. So there's been a lot of evidence by Amnesty International, by Human Rights Watch, UNHCR and other NGOs, local charities and people, that they have been pushing boats back, which is illegal. So last year, they registered 25,000 people entering Greece, but now they can only count 10,000 or 15,000 or so who are there. The 10,000s are missing. So people can't figure it out. So they've been doing a lot of pushbacks in the Turkish Coast Guard and Army. Obviously, for political reasons, have been very good and keeping, making evidence of how the pushbacks, which is illegal under EU law as well as international law. So they've been sending people back, and I've seen videos where they put these small dinghies back in the water, and they've been pushing boats into international water without engine working. So it's really inhumane, immoral, cruel, and wrong to be doing that. If you're not going to grant people asylum, at least don't put them in danger. So things has not improved in any kind of way for refugees, particularly for Afghans, for the people from the Middle East and North Africa and other places where there's been conflicts and wars and people have been fleeing for their lives. This guy, the smuggler, helped him to get to Italy on top of a lorry engine, which was very dangerous and hot. But this place was, I saw people being beaten by sticks by the Greek army and police at this port area, this big place where ships were leaving to all places, but mostly to Italy. And I was really kind of surprised and shocked that this was Europe, this was the EU, this was Greece, which I've heard a lot about in history books. This was supposedly the mother of democracy. This is where the government by the people, for the people was born, but now they were actually so violent towards these refugees who have seen enough violence. But anyhow, I was fortunate. I got across the first attempt or the second attempt to Italy. But this was the first time when I arrived in Italy. I was without my travel companions, without my friends, without the smugglers, without the guides and the supporters, the facilitators, so I didn't really know what to do. The Italian police found me on a motorway after getting out of the lorry. They were very kind to me, and I still remember over 15 years later, they took me into the car, asked me my age, name and nationality, and then asked me if I was hungry. They got me some orange juice, croissant and a sandwich. They didn't have to do that. It's funny, I always thought about the Italians like this mafia state type of thing, you know. But actually they were really, really nice. These two police officers took me to the police station. My face was all blackened by the engine oil and the smoke of the engine, because I was literally sitting on the engine. I was able to change my clothes and wash my face. Language was usually a barrier. We couldn't really understand each other. I don't know why they couldn't find me a Pashto translator, which is my native language. But they took me to a children's home where I spent 2 weeks. I was looked after. The people were incredibly caring and supportive and helpful to me. I was the only like refugee kid there. This was the first time they had like a refugee. This was a place in southern Italy, somewhere near Bari. I forgot the town's name. I never thought I'd write a book, but the book is now published in 7 countries in 6 languages, including Italy and France and Germany. I hope to find the people who helped me. Their names are in the book. I spent 2 weeks. They couldn't really understand my situation, that I had to get to England to find my brother, because that's what the agent told me, the smuggler, that he was heading to Britain. If it weren't for my brother, I would be speaking Italian now. So it was. They were really. And the strange thing was, you know, I was taking shower every day, because one of the things on this journey was being unclean. Very rarely I would get the opportunity to wash myself and get new clothes and have food. For most part of this journey, this 10 months or so, first of all, I didn't keep the time, because I thought there was no. I was keeping the time for a few weeks and then realized there was no point, because you keep time. Sometimes would be stuck in a basement for weeks and months. Sometimes I wouldn't even know if it was day or night. And so I forgot keeping time. So time became irrelevant. But you know, when I worked it out, I was there like, you know, for the 10 months or so. I was kept running for my life, for food, for shelter, for safety. I remember, especially coming to now, I was in Calais. All I wanted was a roof over my head. You know, I didn't care if it was like an old building, it was like a construction site or whatever. Just like some, you know, having a roof to be protected from the wind, from the rain, and from like the snow. So yeah, Italy. It was strange that these people was kind to me, and they were compassionate, and they, you know, they fed me, they bought me clothes, they looked after me, and the thing is, that should have been possible throughout, especially being a child. But there were most occasions that I wasn't treated as a human being, let alone being treated as a child. So this whole thing was really abnormal for me. I said, why are these people doing this to me? And why are they being so kind? Do they have like some sort of agenda? Do they have like, I was very suspicious of receiving the treatment that I should have received the previous 10 months. And so anyway, I left that place. I felt really bad about it even now. I ran away from that place. And long story short, I made it to Rome. I went to this place called Bari, which is, that's the place I remember. I think it was like a €5 ticket I took from this small town to Bari. Maybe either it was a 20-minute journey or it was an hour journey. I don't remember, because I was kind of afraid, upset, and kind of guilty that I was living in such a safe sanctuary, a safe place. So anyways, I managed to get to Rome, which was like 5 hours train journey. I saw people sleeping in cars, sleeping in parks, sleeping in boxes. Very disappointed, and I kind of regretted leaving this nice place, this nice children's home, in a really nice part of the country. The next day was Eid. I wasn't even knew that it was Eid. And actually the day I jumped from this children's home was my 13th birthday. I didn't even know, because I wasn't really keeping time. And so I found this out afterwards when I was writing the book and asking Google when was Eid, and I figured it out. It was on the 12th of October, and my birthday is on the 11th of October. So things made sense. Things just happened through faith in fate. I got help from one of my brother's friends in Rome, and I came to Paris. A lot happened in between Paris and Rome, but I made it to Paris, and 2-3 days train journeys across from Rome to Genoa, from Genoa to Milan, from Milan to Cannes. Cannes? Is there a place called Cannes? Like supposedly a really nice place, but there was a lot of police at the station. And then from Cannes I took a train to Paris, which was a long journey. And then in Paris I spent a very cool night outside Gardeles. There was a park. It was kind of raining. It was like, we arrived late because there were people being taken to shelters, but we arrived late. We had some soup. There was some charity people serving us soup, which was nice. And then I remember staying in a telephone box outside the park. Actually went to check that it's not there anymore. I checked it about like 5 years ago. The place, the box is not there. And the police came, they told me that I couldn't stay there. I was like, I'm just staying here to be away from the rain and the snow. But they're like, you can't stay here and you can't go back to the park. So I was like, what am I supposed to do? But anyways, I tried to sleep on a bench in the park. It was really, really cold. I couldn't sleep. I was with one of my other friends who traveled with me from Rome. The next day I went to Calais. Calais, we call it Calas for some reason. I went to Calais. It was a lot more miserable than I thought, or I imagined. People told me a lot of stories. My brother friend in Rome warned me about this place. It was truly miserable. It was really cold. It was mid-October of 2007. I ended up staying there for a month. But until I wrote the book, I thought I was there for 3 months because the condition was so bad. Being arrested by the police every day, being harassed, our shoes were taken away, sometimes our blankets would be burned, and we would be tear gas at times, we would be running up to lorries every night. I was close to England, yet I was so far. And then from there, after about like maybe 100 attempts, I once burned my face with chemicals in a truck. I attempted all sorts of crossing. It was very dangerous. Once I was taken to Belgium by accident, I was taken to Germany, and the only positive thing in Calais was people who were serving us food, lunch and dinner. They were like some really incredible volunteers and people from the church, from like the local charities, other charities. And the only place we were safe from the police was the lunch and dinner place where we would get food, or the church place where we get like shoes and clothes. So I'm grateful to these people. And there's a lot of people even now. I saw there's a kitchen called Community Kitchen or No Name Kitchen or something like that. They serve about 2,000 people every day food in Calais, which is great. But the police are now, or the government in France as well as elsewhere, are now criminalizing not only refugees but criminalizing people who show compassion. So basically it's a criminal offense if you help refugees, which is troubling. Anyway, I should end soon because I've spoken for more than half an hour. I want us to have a conversation. But I made it to the UK on the back of a refrigerator truck, which was similar to the one we saw a few years ago where 39 Vietnamese people have lost their lives in. The only difference was the refrigerator thing was behind a trailer, so there was a driver in the front. When the smuggler brought us the bananas, he's like, who is going? For the month I was there, the smuggler never really asked us or gave us an option. Every time he would come, he's like, oh, you're going, or such a group is going. But this was the first time he came, and we were very tired. We were running up from the police. It was muddy. That day it was cold. It rained, and so he came and he said, "Who is going?" Everyone looked down. Everyone was like, we know this is like a refrigerator. This is fresh. This could be dangerous, potentially, problematic. I stood up. I was like, "I'm going." And so then he kind of used me as a like, look at this kid. He's going, and you guys are not going. I was quite young, and so 6 other people then came with me. We were very fortunate the driver did not run the freezer. We managed to get across. The driver opened it, he couldn't see us. The French opened it, they couldn't see us. The British border force opened it, couldn't see us. We just got lucky and got across to the UK. And then before the driver could open, actually it was a Polish driver, so there is a link. So when he opened the truck, he saw us. He was really shocked, but he was very smart. He closed it very quickly, and he was like very quick. He called the police, and the police came, and he was in a little trouble. We did try to warn him. It's like, if we call the police, we will tell them that you knew about us. We'll try to bully him. We learned these tricks, And then the police asked us, did he actually knew? Like, no, he didn't know. He just being But he actually didn't know. So my journey of asylum began. We were taken to a custody for 24 hours. And the journey of climbing asylum in the UK was a lot harder than this physical journey that I took across half of the world. So it took me 2 years to convince officials that I was an Afghan national. I tried to get the social services. They disputed my age. They didn't believe I was 13. They're like, you're too smart and too intelligent. You couldn't have traveled the world, half of the world, and you're on. I was like, well, I can't really help it. This is who I am. I'm just telling you, it is what it is. And so it took 2 years to get them to agree to things and accept my age and my nationality. I was threatened to be deported twice by the Home Office, but it was funny because I didn't know where they were deporting me to because they didn't believe I was from Afghanistan. But potentially they wanted to deport me to Afghanistan even though they didn't believe I was from Afghanistan. Yes, it was a dehumanizing process, a really more demoralizing experience. And unfortunately, things has not improved. There's a bill going through Parliament right now, as we speak, It's been passed by the House of Commons, it went to the House of Lords, they sent it back, and they said this is cruel. They want to create a two-tier system of refugees who come through resettlement and refugees who come irregularly. If you come irregularly, if you come through France, you will not even be admitted into the asylum process, because supposedly you're not a genuine refugee. If you're a genuine refugee, their argument is you should stay in France. And the thing that really gets me, of course France could do more, but last year France had about 100,000 asylum applications, and the UK had less than 30,000. 5 times, 3 times, whatever times more asylum applications than the UK, but somehow the UK, there's this mentality from the British public, or certainly from the British government, that refugees should go anywhere but here. Like go anywhere but not the UK. And so it's very troubling, and even people are genuine refugees, they will not be granted refugee status, they will be given a lesser status, a leave to remain for 2.5 years, and they want to deport you. Not only will they send you to your own country, but they will send you to any country who would have you. And I don't know why would any country have Afghans or other refugees, but they've been trying to bully Albania and Rwanda and other countries to accepting them, and they've been discussing sending refugees to Falkland, which is like 11,000 miles away, to have like this offshore detention facility. This idea that people like me are a threat, and we should get rid of them, we should fear people like me, and it's just like, it's very troubling. So yeah, this bill now, they want to help the Ukrainians, which is great, but now they're confused because they see so much solidarity from the public. I have traveled across Britain in the last 5 years. People are kind, people are generous, but the government doesn't really represent them. And so there's been this argument that, oh, we want to stop refugees, we want to stop small boats because it's dangerous, and also because we don't want refugees coming here. We're a small island. In fact, Britain have less than 1% of the world refugees. There are about 85 million displaced people right now, which is like maybe the size of the French population. It's like 85 million? I don't know. 85 million people, the size of the population of Thailand, which I kind of knew. And so about 30 million are refugees, and half of them are children. And UK only hosts 1%, or less than 1%. Germany is the only country in the top 10. France and Austria are the other countries in the top 20. And Britain is like 25th in the world for hosting refugees, but it always claims that we do more than anyone else, which is not true. Anyway, it took me a long time. It took me 5 years to get my refugee status. Then it took me time to go to school, university, college, but I managed to overcome all these challenges and to become who I become. But the states were never supportive of me, of my fellow refugees. And every time they create more policies of deterrence, they create more policies of hostility. And I should end because I've spoken for more than half an hour, and I could go on and on, but I thank you, for listening so attentively. Do whatever you can in every little help. The thing that kept me going in France and Italy and all these places was the kindness of strangers. People just offering me food, people smiling at me, and people giving me directions. I remember once I was picked up by this lady between somewhere away from Lille. I was walking from the Belgian border towards Calais. This lady actually took me all the way with my other friend to Calais. So there's like a lot of kindness shown by individuals. So every little thing that you do, and showing kindness and compassion towards refugees and people that you see on the streets in Paris, please do. And I hope the schools could do more in terms of raising funds and doing work around language classes, maybe doing some sort of like mentoring and buddying, or I don't know, like befriending schemes for refugees who lives around the area. There's so much we could do as individuals as well as collectively. I was at a school in the UK last week. We raised £50,000 in a day to support a local refugee charity. And it's brilliant. So money is always useful, but there are other things we could do as well. And again, thank you for listening, and please ask any question that you may have. Thank you. I could speak to you for an hour, but I don't want to take too much of your time. So yeah, please, hi.
So how did you reconnect with your brother?
Nice, that's a good question. So basically, when I arrived in the UK, I told the government his name and his date of birth, except they have changed also his date of birth like they changed mine. But they said, we can't help you. There are 65 million people in Britain, and potentially we can't find your brother. But actually they could, but they didn't want to. We met through, again, faith in fate. We were supposed to meet, and it was a really lovely story. I'm giving you a book, it's in the book, you could read. But he was studying at Manchester College in the northwest of England, and there was a group of guys who lived with me in Kent, not far from here. They had a trip to London. I didn't go, I've done something. I protested, I walked up to the centre with all the situation that I had, and they said, well, you're not going on this trip because you're being, a troublemaker. I was very activist type, but anyways, they went on a trip. They somehow managed to meet my brother somewhere near London Eye or London Bridge or whatever, Tower Bridge. He recognized these were new Afghans. I mean, I was just walking outside, I saw some Afghans, like, hi guys. They're like, well, we are new. And so I recognized them instantly. But he recognized these guys, they were new, and then started talking to each other. And they were like, oh, we have somebody who speaks as fast as you and who looks like you. And then they kind of figured it out. Because these guys who lived with me in a asylum center, there was a center for unaccompanied minors, for people without families. They knew I had a brother here, but we didn't know where he was. So it was really kind of coincident, but it was meant to be. And then they came back and saying, Gulwali, imagine, guess who we met? I was like, I don't care who we met, just go away. Like, I don't want to speak to you. I'm sad. You can see that I didn't go on this trip. And they said, we met your brother, and it was really lovely. And then he called and he visited me, and then, the whole bromance started. And then, yeah, but now he's going through a lot of tough time. I mean, he had a lot of mental health issues, and he had a lot of struggles. He's trying to bring his wife and son now. It took him like 7 years to get his status, a lot of issues, but he's fine. I've been trying to help and support him, and he's been very supportive of me, especially through my educational career. He supported our mother back home and our family, sending them money so I can focus on my studies, like went to school, college, university, and I was able to do my master's and so on. And so, yeah, it was really wonderful that we met. And in hindsight, it was really great that the smugglers separated us. In life, I'm supposed to be giving you short answers, but in life, when something happens, you think that, this could be the worst thing that happens to you, which at the time I was very upset and angry about. But I knew at some point when I went on this journey, we would have been separated anyway, because I was separated from very close companions and friends. There were occasions where I was the only person that they could fit me into the seals of the train, or they could put me in a top of a lorry engine. So maybe if we were together, we would have delayed each other, and also if we were deported, we would have just gone home. That could have caused other implications. But I think him not being with me gave me the sense of motivation. And so I didn't want to let down my mother. I had hopes and faith that things will happen. I thought, God had a plan for me, which I'm like a big believer of. Things I know. I go where my sustenance is. I'm here because I was meant to be drinking this water. I came all the way from Kabul to be here. So I'm glad they separated us. And I think they did a very smart thing, because it gave me the determination to find him. And also to kind of not rely. If he was with me, maybe I would have relied on him too much. Maybe I wouldn't have made the effort that I had to. And so sometime in life you have to make your own decisions, and you have to grow up, and you're going to New York, so good luck, and you will be fine for your studies. And at the time it was really sad, but then later on, looking back on it now, I'm glad I was able to do it on my own, and didn't have to make life difficult for him if he was with me. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
I had a question. First of all, thank you for sharing your story with us. I had a question about you certainly made a lot of stops along the way of your journey, and then the final stop in the UK, and you met some places better than others, more welcoming or not, and you have sometimes access to food or shelter, clothes. How much, in terms of help, people coming from such traumatic situations, how much mental and health related support are you getting at each of these stops, or maybe even in the UK when you finally were able to settle down?
Nice. Sadly, none.
No,
very little. So basically, the only time I got actually, the healthcare profession was always very compassionate, very humanitarian, which I guess they got to be. But and we got a lot of help from them in Athens to get us out of prison. But they were at no point in this journey did I get any mental health or other support in terms of emotional well-being. There was no support other than when I was in this children's home in Italy. They were very mindful. They used to take me places, take me on trips, take me to the seaside. I think there were ways of, maybe they didn't do it directly, but indirectly there was support I was getting from this safe place. But in the UK, I didn't access mental health support until I was at school, which was about 3 years later than I arrived. And that mental health support wasn't adequate. It was not for people like me. It was for people who were born in the UK. My experience of growing up in a war zone, that has impacted me in the journey that I had to take. People can't imagine. So I think, I think the normal mental health services, there is very little support available to refugees and asylum seekers. But even the support that is available, if you're lucky, if you could get it, it's not really fit for purpose. I think what I found useful is, I got involved with a lot of activism, campaigning work, and trying to find solutions, trying to do good work, trying to do charity work. These things has helped me when I was busy. I still have nightmares, but when I was busy, that was helpful. And also, going on trips, going to the countryside, visiting people, having friends, having mentors. So there are ways where it helps you overcome these challenges and overcome these adversities. But yeah, the help that I received was very, very little, or to none in the beginning. But now, I mean, like, to be honest, a lot of people have mental health issues generally. Like in the UK, they can't provide the support for just like the ordinary citizen, let alone for refugees. My mental health was always taken seriously, but I mean, my physical health was always taken seriously, my mental health not so much.
I was just wondering, in general, the help that you received, was it more from like charities and NGOs, or did you receive more help from the governments themselves, like in centers?
So in most cases, the help was from individuals, from charities, very little from the government. I mean, the government was always the one, instead of helping me and my fellow refugees, they were the one harassing us. And now I know, for example, in Calais, the British taxpayer, like now I'm part of the British taxpayers, we pay money to the French authorities to harass refugees, to burn their shoes, to take away their blankets, to tear gas them. Of course, we don't say that in the contract, but that's the ideas that they prevent people from coming to the UK. And the UK has spent £200 million, actually £220 million on building fences in Calais. The reason people are making the journey on small boats and dinghies, because the government has made it impossible for them to come through the lorries and trucks, which is also dangerous. There is no alternative in terms of safe routes, in terms of legal routes, in terms of safe passage, humanitarian corridors. So yeah, on the journey, I didn't receive much support from governments. And even in the UK, I think, I got a lot more help from my school, from my foster parents, and other ways other than the government themselves. The government was never really supportive. And even now, I mean, this new bill that's going through, even now I'm a citizen, now I have to worry about my citizenship being revoked. So there's this new law which they will remove people's citizenship for national security reasons, for public good reasons, and because I don't think they like me very much, so they could take away my citizenship. And so I had to keep living kind of a sense of fear and uncertainty, which was a different answer to your question, but yeah. Hi.
I had a question actually about the school when you were in the UK. It seemed like learning was very, very important to you, from what I remember from reading the book, and also learning your native language. And it seemed like it was something that was really, really important to you, and something that mattered a lot to you. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about what it meant to be able to learn your native language, to be in school. What was your experience like at school?
Sure. I mean, school was very important to me, education, because I had to fight to go to school because of my age dispute. So I said I was 13. Social service was saying I was 16 and a half, so I couldn't go to school. I couldn't really go to college because I was younger. So it was a really complicated situation. And then it took about 2 years until it was resolved. I got a help from it was a center for international new arrivals. It was a unit, a very unique school type thing. It was not really a school, but it was a school. It was a place for people, refugees, asylum seekers, migrants, people from all over the world who came to this place called Bolton in the northwest. And they were able to go to this place. They will help you to go to mainstream school or mainstream college or other educational institutions. When I went there, they really helped me, and I was able to challenge the age situation. And after a year or so, I was able to go to school. And school was tough. It was very challenging. English isn't my first or second language, it's my fifth language. So I remember the school was somewhat disorganized. They put me in a German class, and I was like, the German teacher really liked me, like learning the language. And like, yeah, I should have learned it, it was great. And then I was like, okay, now I need to learn English first before I learn German. And so, the school didn't know what, even though it was a very diverse and multicultural school. And now I regret not learning German, because I go to Germany a lot. My uncle lives in Vienna, and my book is published, as well as in the UK, here, but as well as in Germany. So I go to Germany a lot. I go to Berlin, Munich, and here and there, Frankfurt. It would have been good to learn. The German people don't want to speak to you in English, so it would have been good to speak to them in German. They would really impress. But yeah, so in terms of my native language, I didn't really do any studies in my native language. But I learned Urdu, which was a Pakistani language. I did it because I wanted to get an extra GCC. It's good to learn languages. And so I'm still learning English. I still learn words. Even though it's like 15 years later, and my wife sometimes kind of bullies me, she teases me, like, oh, spell something. I'm like, I can't spell this. She's like, oh, you have a master's. I'm like, master, I didn't teach me to spell things, like, So it was a long journey, but the education, only about 3% refugees get a chance to go to higher education because of lack of qualification, access to education, funding, restriction in terms of legal status. I mean, I had a place at the University of Manchester, but I didn't have my refugee status. They said you had to pay £14,000, which is like 17,000 euros. I said, if I had that much money, I wouldn't be going to uni. And so thankfully I was able to get my status sorted and get help and support, but there are a lot of people who doesn't get this opportunity. And so in terms of secondary education, about 24%, now that's increased a little bit, about 24% the young refugees get a chance to get a secondary education. So don't take anything for granted. Make the most of it, be appreciative of it. And about 60% or so gets access to go to primary school. So
In
60,
the UK?
no, in the world.
In the world, okay.
So refugees, about 60%, 64% have access to primary education, 24% have access to secondary education, but only 3% have access to higher education. So I'm part of a very small number of refugees who are able not just to get a degree in politics, but also actually go and do a master's as well.
I wanted to ask how, you told me you have so many of these speaking events and you're retelling your story multiple times, and I wanted to ask how has that impacted you where you are now and how you managed to stay so positive despite that?
Thank you. I used to be very bitter and angry, and I realized it didn't work much, so I changed my tactics. No, actually, I think, I used to be a very angry young man. I've said and written things that I'm not proud of, but I've learned that to convey your message, you've got to do it in a positive way. It just happened, and because there's so much negative things happening in the world, and my message is around, compassion and solidarity and helping and supporting refugees. These are our fellow human beings, and we've got to help and support them. If I have a choice, I don't want to be a refugee. I don't know anybody who wants to be a refugee. It's like us, the Ukrainians. They don't want to be refugees. They want to be in their own homes. People are forced to flee, and that's the thing. But then what happens is in states like in Europe, people then see you as suspects, look at you suspiciously, like you're not really a refugee. You might be here for other reasons. You could be here. I mean, even like this idea of economic migrants, there's nothing wrong being an economic migrant. Perhaps you guys move from Poland to France for economic reasons. That's fine. People move for studies. People move for all sorts of other reasons. But refugees, we have specific responsibility towards them. And when I talk, I think when I'm telling the story, it's just a story for me. But actually, sometimes when I think about it deep down, it upsets me. And the thing that really upsets me is not what happened to me, but what is happening to people right now. So I was in Calais. I got my refugee status in 2013. I was able to travel back and forth. Every year I came back, brought medicine, brought my friends who are doctors to help out. I saw a lot of guys who were injured, came and spent time with people, just like play music and have fun, because these guys were really isolated and bored, and they had a tough time. The only difference was because I had this piece of paper, these documents that they didn't have. There were people who were a lot more handsome than me, a lot more deserving than me, but they were stuck in this place, and I was able to travel back because I had a piece of paper. So this thing come back to, where you're born is an accident of birth, but that determines your life chances. So I don't enjoy what I do. The only thing I enjoy is I get to meet people like you. I get to travel, and I really enjoy that. And I think the book has really opened so many avenues for me. Hopefully people take me seriously. And I've been trying to influence change at a higher level, speaking to politicians. And I hope you guys could write to your representatives. You guys could write a letter collectively as a school. So that's what I've been doing in the UK, getting children to write to their MPs. Members of Parliament saying, look, we need to be helping children, we need to be helping refugees. And so just raising awareness, spreading that message of, kind of compassion and love rather than hatred and fear, because there's just so much in the media and from this right-wing politician, even in France and elsewhere as well, they blame all their problem on us, come on, when you go to a doctor, you're most likely to see a refugee doctor rather than seeing a refugee as a patient. If you go to a school, you will see a teacher who is from a migrant background than being a student. So, and again, there's nothing wrong being, if you are ill, you got to go to the doctor. But most of these guys, they pay their taxes, they work hard, they contribute to society. And I always say, we shouldn't welcome refugees because they contribute. We should welcome them because it's the right thing to do. You don't look at people saying, oh, you should welcome him because you're going to be, a good economist, or you're going to be a good doctor or whatever. So, I feel like I have a sense of responsibility and I have a platform to use. And so whenever I get an opportunity to speak to people, I speak to them. And by sharing my story, I hope we can have this human interaction. I've done it more than 500 times, but I think it's still important that we create this, to humanize this debate and discussion, because right now, these refugees and asylum seekers and migrants are just some sort of statistics and numbers. People don't see them as individuals, or the government don't see them as individuals. They just see them as some such statistics and political tools. We saw what happened in the situation of Ukraine and Belarus, where people were stranded there, but they were used as a political tool. And it's happening a lot of like this. Now people stranded in Bosnia, in Serbia, and the Greek islands, and Turkey and other places. So, there are 5 million Afghan refugees in Iran and Pakistan, and there are more. 1 million have fled Afghanistan in the last 6 months to Iran alone, and more will come. And when they come, they will be criminalized, especially in the UK with this new bill and this new law. There has been always hostility and deterrence, but now this is going to be in a statutes book, in law, that if you're a refugee, if you come through. And it's just really strange, because the UK have this British exceptionalism idea that, if you're a refugee, you should be staying in the first safe country. There is nothing in international law that says so. But I'm giving you another answer to your question, but I hope that makes sense. Have I bored you? Hi.
You mentioned briefly in your talk about how fast the media moves, and how 9 months ago, for example, during summer, everyone was talking about Afghanistan situation, and now it seems that nobody ever talks about it. And so how can we both, on an individual level and the media, can do to keep on raising awareness? And because, for example, you mentioned in your talk that they had just one of the harshest winters, and I wasn't even aware of that.
Sure.
Because absolutely nobody talks about it anymore. How do you recommend us as a school, individuals, and the media keep Afghanistan sort of in the conversation, and so we can raise awareness for the
Great. Thank you. So not only the harsh winter, Afghanistan had the worst droughts in 30 years. And together with all this chaos and all these changes of system and government. So I think, media always have this thing where, where the news is, they go up in the news. And Afghanistan has been in the news for 20 years, and people are kind of bored of it. It's like, But I feel like conversation on an individual basis, speaking to our family and friends, speaking, for example, saying, right now, 10 million people are experiencing famine. And about 28 million people, which is more than half of the Afghan population, there are about 40 million people in Afghanistan. We haven't done consensus for 20 years, 30 years or so, but there's an assumption there are about 40 million people, 5 million are refugees, and about 35 million are in the country. 6 million are internally displaced. There are about 5 million who are basically drug addicts. We have lots of social issues, but about 28 million people right now, according to the UN, needs food, needs the basic humanitarian assistance. And they try to provide that, but the money is not forthcoming. And so hopefully by speaking to our friends and family and social media to raise awareness, and I think the media has to be responsible in informing people of what's happening. Because yes, I was in Kabul, and as well as I went to Jalalabad, which is my native town in eastern Afghanistan, girls were going to school. Women were working in the airport. I went to hospital, there was women working. I went to a school, there was women teachers. So of course the Taliban has put a lot of restrictions on women and girls, but things are changing, things are happening. And so we've got to continue the dialogue and discussion with the Taliban, whether we like them or not. They're the government. Somehow they managed to be in power again. They're controlling the whole country. There is a sense of security. 300, 400 people are not dying. Yes, there is no accountability. Yes, there is no democracy. There's very little human rights, but it is what it is, and you've got to deal with the situation and circumstances that we are faced with. The Taliban, I spoke to people, they're like, we want to open girls' schools, but we don't have money to fund it. For example, we want to give women's opportunities within the Islamic kind of rules and restrictions, but we just don't have the necessary funds and support available. So the media needs to be speaking about the whole thing, not just what is bite sides, what people want to hear. And we were discussing earlier, somebody was saying people want to hear what they want to hear. No, actually the gentleman, the security guy was saying, we had a conversation, look, people want to hear what they want to hear, people want to see what they want to see, which is very true. So yeah, the media needs to be more responsible, and instead of creating fear and hatred, they need to inform people. Just a final example, in the UK there was a campaign by the Emergency Disaster Committee, an appeal for Afghanistan, and they raised £30 million in a few days. And now for Ukraine, they actually raised double of that. So, this was from people, and the government then matched it and doubled it. So, the media played a role in informing people and letting them know. So I think not just sensation news and creating fear and hatred, which they're very good at, saying, these refugees are coming, people are taking over our country, they're crossing small dinghies, we're being invaded. I saw a tweet this morning, somebody replied to my tweet saying, they are a bunch of, I said, some refugees arrived to the UK, and I was like, thank God they arrived safely. And he's like, they're a bunch of garbage. And people saying, people have been using very dehumanizing language towards refugees. And I saw somebody tweet me, I said I came back from Afghanistan after 16 years, I went back, and they're like, go back, empty, go back, we don't need you, we need your space to give, we need your space to give to Ukrainians. I was like, okay, great, okay, if that helps, I'm in France now, so give the space to the Ukrainians. Anyway, so there's this thing that the social media and media could play a more constructive role in letting people know, and hopefully people can make more informed decisions. But it starts with individuals, it starts with society. There's a bigger work to be done, and I've been doing my bit. I do like 100 interviews a year, and usually it causes more problems than solves it. I get then bombarded by Twitter, and they give me like 2 minutes. They just say, oh, we had a refugee on. And they don't like to call me an author. They don't want to call me like a humanitarian. They just want to have that label. Even though I'm not a refugee anymore officially, but they still call me like a refugee because they want to show that they had a diverse opinion. And then I don't get to say much. My things are then taken out of context. Like, who the hell is this guy wanting us to help people? Why is he being ungrateful? Why is he not being appreciated? So anyway, there's so much debate and discussion, but I'm glad that you guys has given me the chance and opportunity to speak to you for over an hour, and you've been patiently listening, and I hope it has been helpful and in some ways put things into perspectives for you.
And can we call you humanitarian? What do you prefer?
Yeah, whatever you call me. I'm a human. I mean, like, yeah, I'm a human. Like this thing, like, who you are. Like when I was a student, people were, like, the media was reluctant to call me student, and they were like, of course I'm being an Afghan, being a refugee is just a label. Doesn't mean anything other than like your legal status. But they like to put people in boxes. And so yes, I'm a person, and I don't mind being called a humanitarian or being an activist, advocate and campaigner, being an author. There's so many labels that we could have, but the media wants to use the most, like, the one that with negative connotations, with not a positive message. But yeah, there was a. Sorry, you want to ask a question? Please go ahead.
Yes, I was just wondering if you could maybe talk a bit about the conversation with your mom when you decided she wanted you and your brother to go, and then what was it like when you saw her 15 years afterwards?
Sure. There was actually very little conversation when we left. I never really listened to my mom, and then I did, and then she sent me away, miles away. But I knew the situation was serious because I've lost loved ones to the war, and we were being targeted by the Taliban to join them. To become fighters and potentially even become suicide bombers against the US forces, which I was very keen on the idea at the time, to take revenge, but also to fight a holy war. All these things were very appealing to me as an 11, 10, 12 years old kid. But my mother, her understanding was violence wasn't the answer, and she and my grandmother really forced us, because at the time my uncles were in prison. We had a situation where we needed to be at home. We needed to be kind of the man of the house, which we tried, even though as kids. And when I went back, I had very little conversation with her as well. We didn't talk much. She really doesn't understand my worlds, but I was just there in her presence, and she was happy that I was safe, and I was able to return. Because until now, a few years ago, my wife traveled to Afghanistan, and before she left, she was there for 2 weeks. There was 3 suicide bombing in that 2 weeks. When she was coming back, my mother told her to tell me not to come back. But recently, she actually told me to come back, and she wasn't feeling well, and so she's like, come back. And I had a really positive experience. I had no issue whatsoever. I mean, at the airport, traveling back, I had no issue with the Taliban whatsoever, because I was just wearing very normal Afghan dress. I was being very low key. I told no one. I didn't post nothing on social media, and so I was very careful. And everywhere I went, people just thought I was a local. And yeah, my mother, we had very little conversation, other than just to see, how she was. And I've lost a lot because since I left, she lost her young daughter. My uncle passed away, and she lost her father, mother-in-law, and there's been other deaths in the family. But she have now I was sleeping with her in the room. The whole room was full of her grandchildren, and all night she was shouting at them. And some of them she was like, for some she will pray, for others she will curse. I was like, Mom, I'm not sleeping with you in the room. And so she had now, because when I left, she had no grandchildren. Now she has 4, 2, 6, 8. She had like 10 grandchildren from my sister and my brother. So yeah, but I'm glad I was able to see her. I should recall it today because I have I forgot about it. I'm speaking to some people in Darlington in the north of England. They have a book club, which I forgot about, but I need to speak to them. So hopefully I can find somewhere quiet. I could speak to them for the next hour or so. But again, thank you. Please stay in touch. View social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whatever. Wishing you well with your studies, your lives. We might have our challenges, we might have our problems, but it's nothing compared to the situation with the Afghans who are struggling to survive the conditions in Ukraine and other places. So I hope we can let go of our first world problems and trying to help these people who are really struggling to survive, because our problem is not the survival issue. We have other issues which is not as important as the actual problems in the world. So yeah. Thank you. I hope I have not made you feel bad, but I tried to be funny, but my English is not like I struggle with being a comedian. But I hope it was a positive experience. And thank you again.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks for organizing.
Say thank you also to Victoria.
Yeah, thank you. I should have said that. I should have said
Thank
that.
you so much.
Yeah, and give her a round of applause.
Yes, yes, yes. Because it looks easy, but it's a lot of work. I mean, she's been in touch with me for like over a year trying to get me here. But yeah, so well done.
And did you bring copies of your book?
I should have, but I forgot about I was coming here, so I was like.
Actually, with the leftover money from the fundraiser, we managed to buy 8 copies, which we'll donate to the library.
It wasn't actually a leftover. I allowed it. I was like, yeah.
Yes.
I will send you some more copies. So
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you very much. Thank you, guys.